The arrival. The sleek obsidian spacecraft sliced through Earth's atmosphere, its hull barely shimmering as advanced cloaking technology rendered it nearly invisible. Inside, Zarek, the most feared assassin in the Galactic Confederation, sneered at the primitive blue and green orb growing larger in his viewscreen. Earth, a backwater planet, barely worth noting in the vast expanse of the cosmos. Yet here he was, sent to eliminate a single target who had sought refuge on this technological wasteland. Zarek flexed his four-fingered hand, feeling the familiar tingle of his neurotoxin-laced claws extending and retracting. This would be almost too easy. As the ship's AI guided them towards a landing site, Zarek reviewed his mission brief one last time. The target, a minor bureaucrat named Lixia, who had stumbled upon sensitive information about the Confederation's true plans for the unaligned worlds. Normally, such a low-level mark wouldn't warrant Zarek's attention, but Lixia had managed to evade capture for months, slipping through the fingers of lesser assassins. The fact that she had chosen Earth as her final hiding place only proved her desperation. What protection could this primitive world offer against the galaxy's deadliest killer? The ship touched down silently in a dense forest, its landing struts barely disturbing the underbrush. Zarek stepped out, his mottled gray skin instantly adapting to match the dappled shadows around him. He took a deep breath, his olfactory glands flaring at the unfamiliar sense of Earth's vegetation. Scan complete, the ship's AI chimed in his neural implant. Target located approximately 20 kilometers northeast. Local population, minimal. Nearest human settlement, 5 kilometers east. Zarek grunted in acknowledgement. He wouldn't need to worry about witnesses. His cloaking device would render him invisible to the primitive optical sensors of humans. And even if someone did manage to spot him, what could they do? Throw rocks. He set off through the forest, his movements silent and fluid. The lush vegetation reminded him vaguely of his homeworld, though the plants here seemed softer, less vicious. No razor-edged leaves or toxic spores to watch out for. Pathetic. As he traveled, Zarek reflected on the reports he'd read about Earth's defenses. Projectile weapons, mostly crude things that fired metal slugs using chemical propellants. Some energy weapons, but nothing that could penetrate his adaptive shielding. And in some parts of the world, humans still used archaic weapons like swords and bows. The thought made him chuckle. Imagine facing a galactic assassin with a piece of bent wood and a string. He almost wished he'd encounter one of these archers. It would make for an amusing anecdote to share with his fellow assassins back at the guild. After an hour of travel, Zarek paused at the edge of a clearing. His neural implant buzzed, warning him of movement ahead. He crouched, activating his thermal vision to scan the area. There, a heat signature moving through the trees on the far side of the clearing. Too large to be his target, but definitely humanoid. Probably just a local out for a walk, but Zarek decided to observe for a moment, curious about these earthlings he'd heard so much about. The figure that emerged from the tree line was tall for a human, clad in muted greens and browns that blended well with the forest. Zarek's eyes widened slightly as he recognized the weapon in the human's hands, a bow, elegantly curved and obviously well crafted. So he'd stumbled upon one of Earth's archers after all. He watched as the human moved with surprising grace, pausing every few steps to scan the surroundings. Zarek had to admit, the Earthling's situational awareness was impressive for a primitive, almost as if. The thought hit him a split second before the arrow did. With a hiss of pain and shock, Zarek felt something puncture his shoulder, slipping through a gap in his adaptive armor. He staggered back, cloaking device flickering as his systems tried to compensate for the unexpected damage. "I know you're there," a calm, steady voice called out. "Your cloaking technology is impressive, but it doesn't mask your heat signature or the way you disturb the air." Zarek snarled, his translator rendering the sound into something the human would understand. "Impossible," he spat. "No primitive weapon should be able to penetrate my defenses." The human archer stepped fully into the clearing, another arrow nocked and ready. Now that Zarek could see him clearly, he realized the bow was no simple wooden contraption. It was a sophisticated piece of engineering, with pulleys and cables that he didn't fully understand. "There's nothing primitive about this bow," the archer said, a hint of amusement in his voice. "Carbon fiber limbs, titanium riser, and arrows tipped with a rather nasty little surprise for tech-reliant beings like yourself." Zarek felt his systems struggling to adapt. Whatever was in that arrow was playing havoc with his cybernetic enhancements. He tried to raise his wrist-mounted plasma caster, but his arm responded sluggishly. "Who are you?" he demanded. "How did you know I was here?" The archer kept his bow trained on Zarek, eyes never wavering. "My name is Alexei Volkov, former Special Forces, current protector of those who seek refuge on our primitive world. As for how I knew," he shrugged, "let's just say Earth has a few tricks up its sleeve that the galaxy at large doesn't know about yet." Zarek's mind raced. This changed everything. If Earth had defenses capable of detecting and countering Confederation technology, his mission was compromised before it had even begun. He needed to retreat, to report this unexpected development to his superiors. But first, he needed to eliminate this human who had seen him. With a roar, Zarek lunged forward, ignoring the pain in his shoulder as he extended his neurotoxin claws. Alexei's eyes widened, but his reaction was instant. He loosed his arrow, the projectile whistling past Zarek's ear as the assassin dodged. Zarek allowed himself a smirk. Fast, but not fast enough. The arrow exploded behind him, sending out a pulse of energy that dropped Zarek to his knees. His vision swam, cybernetic implants screaming with conflicting data. "EMP-tipped arrows," Alexei explained, already knocking another. "Designed specifically to disrupt the kind of technology your people rely on, courtesy of some friends we've made out there in the stars." Friends? Earth had allies among the spacefaring races. This was getting worse by the second. Zarek tried to activate his emergency beacon to signal his ship for extraction, but nothing happened. He was cut off. "Now then," Alexei continued, his tone hardening, "why don't you tell me why the Galactic Confederation's top assassin is skulking around in Earth's forests? I doubt you're here for the scenery." Zarek weighed his options. His technology was compromised, but he still had his natural abilities. If he could just get close enough. "I'm here for a fugitive," he said, trying to keep the human talking while he gathered his strength. "A being named Lixia. She possesses information that could destabilize the entire sector. Surely you understand the need for discretion in such matters." Alexei's eyes narrowed. "I understand that discretion usually means silencing inconvenient truths when it comes to governments. What did Lixia learn that has you so spooked?" Zarek tensed, preparing to spring. "Why don't you ask her yourself?" He snarled, then launched himself at the human with preternatural speed. But Alexei was ready. As Zarek lunged, the archer smoothly sidestepped, bringing his bow around in a sweeping arc. The riser apparently waited for just such a maneuver, caught Zarek across the face with bone-jarring force. The assassin hit the ground hard, his world spinning. How had a human managed to outmaneuver him? He was the product of generations of genetic engineering, enhanced by the finest cybernetics the Confederation could produce. As he struggled to rise, he felt the cold press of an arrowhead against the back of his neck. "I wouldn't," Alexei said softly. "This one's loaded with a nerve toxin that would put even your enhanced system into shock. Now let's try this again. What does Lixia know?" Zarek laughed bitterly. "You have no idea what you're involved in, human. The Confederation's reach extends further than you can imagine. We've had agents on your world for centuries, preparing the way. What Lixia discovered, it would shatter your primitive concept of history." He felt the arrowhead press harder. "Try me," Alexei growled. Before Zarek could respond, a high-pitched whine filled the air. Both assassin and archer looked up to see a sleek craft descending into the clearing. It wasn't Zarek's ship. The craft's hatch opened, and a slender, violet-skinned being emerged. "Lixia." "That's quite enough, Alexei," she called out. "I think our friend here has learned an important lesson about underestimating Earth." Alexei didn't lower his bow. "You want to explain what's going on, Lixia? Because from where I'm standing, we've got a Confederation assassin on our hands and a whole lot of unanswered questions." Lixia approached, her large, dark eyes fixed on Zarek. "What I discovered goes far beyond simple political secrets. Zarek, the Confederation, it's not what any of us thought it was. And Earth," she gestured around at the forest. "Earth is far more important than anyone realizes." Zarek's mind reeled. "The implications. Your mission was never going to succeed." Lixia continued. "Earth has been protected for millennia. Its people allowed to develop along their own path. What I learned, it suggests that humanity might be the key to something greater than the Confederation could ever be." "Impossible," Zarek muttered. But even as he said it, doubt crept in. He'd been bested by a human with a bow, after all. Alexei sighed. "I'm getting the feeling this is about to become a lot more complicated than a simple protection detail." Lixia smiled sadly. "Oh, my friend, you have no idea. The fate of the galaxy may well rest on what happens here on Earth in the coming days." As the implications of Lixia's words sank in, Zarek realized that his mission, his entire worldview, had just been turned upside down, and it had all started with an arrow from a supposedly primitive human weapon. He looked up at Alexei, seeing the archer in a new light. "I believe," he said slowly, "that I may have made a grave error in judgment about your world." Alexei snorted. "Yeah, we get that a lot. Welcome to Earth, where nothing is quite as primitive as it seems." As Lixia's ship settled onto the forest floor, Zarek couldn't shake the feeling that he had stumbled into something far greater than a simple assassination mission. The galaxy, it seemed, was about to learn just how dangerous it was to underestimate humanity. The hunt. The forest hummed with tension as Zarek, Alexei, and Lixia stood in an uneasy triangle, each assessing the others. The assassin's pride smarted from his defeat, but curiosity now tempered his aggression. Alexei kept his bow half-drawn, ready to release at a moment's notice, while Lixia's eyes darted between the two, calculating. "We can't stay here," Lixia said, breaking the silence. "My arrival will have been detected. We need to move." Alexei's jaw tightened. "Move where, exactly? And why should I trust either of you?" Zarek surprised himself by laughing, a harsh sound that made the others flinch. "Trust. You've bested me in combat, human. By the laws of my people, I owe you a life debt." "How convenient," Alexei muttered, but Lixia nodded. "He speaks the truth. Zarek's species takes such debts very seriously. It's one of the reasons he's such an effective assassin. He always completes his contracts." The implications hung heavy in the air. Zarek had failed in his mission to eliminate Lixia, and now he was bound by honor to the very human who had thwarted him. "Fine," Alexei said after a moment. "But I want answers. Real ones, not more cryptic warnings about the fate of the galaxy." Lixia opened her mouth to respond, but a distant whine cut her off. All three tensed, recognizing the sound of approaching spacecraft. "Confederation scouts," Zarek growled. "They must have detected my distress signal before your EMP arrow shorted out my systems." Alexei cursed under his breath. "There's a network of caves about 2 kilometers north. We can lose them in there and regroup." Without waiting for agreement, he set off at a brisk pace, bow at the ready. Lixia followed immediately, leaving Zarek to bring up the rear. The assassin marveled at how quietly the human moved through the underbrush, barely disturbing a leaf. As they traveled, Zarek tried to make sense of his situation. Everything he thought he knew about Earth, about his mission, about the very structure of galactic society, had been called into question in the span of an hour. He found himself studying Alexei's back, noting the efficient economy of movement, the constant awareness of his surroundings. "You're not just some random archer," Zarek said as they paused to let Lixia catch her breath. "You've had training. Extensive training." Alexei's eyes never stopped scanning the forest as he replied, "Let's just say Earth has been preparing for this day for a long time. We knew we weren't alone in the universe, and we knew that sooner or later someone would come knocking." "But how?" Zarek pressed. "The Confederation's non-interference protocols for pre-FTL civilizations are absolute. No one should have made contact with Earth." A ghost of a smile crossed Alexei's face. "You'd be surprised how many of your people disagree with those protocols. We've had friends helping us prepare for centuries." Before Zarek could respond, the whine of engines grew louder. A sleek, dart-like craft zipped overhead, its sensors sweeping the forest floor. "Move," Alexei hissed, and they were off again, pushing deeper into the woods. The caves loomed before them, dark mouths in the face of a steep hillside. Alexei led them to a narrow opening, partially concealed by vegetation. "In here," he said, ushering Lixia through before turning to Zarek. "Any tricks up your sleeve that might help us avoid detection?" Zarek considered for a moment, then nodded. "My adaptive camouflage is damaged, but I might be able to rig it to mask our heat signatures. It won't fool them for long, but it might buy us some time." "Do it," Alexei ordered, nocking an arrow and taking up a position at the cave's entrance. As Zarek worked, Lixia finally spoke up. "I suppose you want those answers now." Alexei snorted. "That would be nice, yeah. Starting with why the Confederation is so desperate to keep whatever you found a secret." Lixia took a deep breath. "What I discovered, it changes everything we thought we knew about the origins of intelligent life in the galaxy. The Confederation isn't just a political entity. It's a construct created to guide the development of younger races." Zarek's hands froze over his armor's control panel. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying that the Confederation was created by a race far older and more advanced than any we've encountered. They'd been shepherding the development of countless species, including humanity, for millions of years." Alexei's grip on his bow tightened. "Why? To what end?" Lixia's eyes seemed to glow in the dim light of the cave. "Because they're searching for something. A potential that they believe exists in all intelligent life, but which they've never been able to fully realize themselves. And they think humanity might be the key." The implications hit Zarek like a physical blow. If what Lixia was saying was true, then everything he had fought for, killed for, was built on a lie. "You're talking about the progenitors," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "The mythical race that supposedly seeded the galaxy with life. But that's just a legend, a religious belief held by some fringe groups." Lixia shook her head. "It's no legend, Zarek. They're real, and they've been guiding our development all along. The Confederation's true purpose is to identify species with the potential to join them, to become something more." Alexei's laugh was tinged with disbelief. "So, what? Humanity is some kind of galactic science experiment?" "Not just humanity," Lixia corrected. "Every intelligent species, but humans, you've developed differently. Your adaptability, your creativity, your sheer stubborn refusal to accept limitations. It's unlike anything the progenitors have seen before." The distant whine of engines had faded, but none of them relaxed. Zarek finished his modifications, a soft hum indicating that the heat-masking field was active. "If what you're saying is true," Zarek said slowly, "then why send assassins after you? Why not simply suppress the information?" Lixia's expression darkened. "Because not everyone in the Confederation agrees with the progenitors' methods. There's a faction that believes humanity and other primitive species should be subjugated, not nurtured. They see Earth's potential as a threat, not a promise." Alexei cursed softly. "And let me guess, that faction is on its way here right now." As if in answer, a massive explosion rocked the forest outside. The cave entrance collapsed in a shower of rocks and dust, plunging them into darkness. "Well," Alexei's voice came from the gloom, eerily calm. "I guess the hunt is on." Zarek felt a strange mix of emotions: anger at being manipulated, fear of the unknown forces arrayed against them, and, surprisingly, a growing respect for the human who stood ready to face it all with nothing but a bow and his wits. "We need to find another way out," Lixia said, her voice tight with tension. Alexei's silhouette nodded in the faint light coming from Zarek's armor. "These caves form a network. If we can navigate them, we might be able to circle back and catch our pursuers off guard." Zarek found himself nodding in agreement. "A sound strategy, but we'll need to be cautious. If they brought in heavy weapons, they won't care about collateral damage." "Welcome to Earth," Alexei said with a grim chuckle, "where the collateral damage is usually us. Come on, let's move." As they ventured deeper into the cave system, Zarek reflected on how quickly his world had turned upside down. He had come to this planet confident in his superiority, only to find himself relying on a human's skills and knowledge to survive. The tunnels twisted and turned, the darkness broken only by the soft glow of Zarek's armor. Alexei led the way, his movements sure despite the lack of light. Lixia followed, her breath coming in short gasps as the stress of their situation took its toll. "How much of Earth is aware of all this?" Zarek asked as they paused at a junction, Alexei considering their path. "More than you'd think, less than you'd hope," the human replied. "We've had to walk a fine line. Prepare for eventual contact without causing panic. It's why we focused on developing our own technology rather than relying too heavily on what our allies could provide." Lixia spoke up, her voice echoing slightly in the cavern. "It's remarkable, really. Earth has managed to advance at an unprecedented rate without drawing undue attention. The bow Alexei carries. It's as much a product of advanced material science as it is traditional craftsmanship." Zarek nodded, impressed despite himself. "A clever deception, maintaining the appearance of a pre-FTL civilization while secretly preparing for galactic conflict." "We've had good teachers," Alexei said with a shrug. "Now, if we can just—" He was cut off by a low rumble that shook the entire cave system. Dust and small rocks rained down from the ceiling. "They're using seismic charges," Zarek growled, "trying to flush us out or bury us alive." Alexei's expression hardened. "Then we don't have much time. This way. I think I know where we can get the drop on them." They moved faster now, the urgency of their situation driving them forward. The rumbles grew more frequent, the cave walls groaning under the stress. As they rounded a corner, a shaft of daylight appeared ahead. Alexei held up a hand, signaling for caution. They crept forward, the sounds of voices and equipment growing louder. At the cave's mouth, they peered out onto a scene of organized chaos. A dozen Confederation soldiers were setting up a perimeter, their sleek armor gleaming in the sunlight. Heavy weapons were being unloaded from a transport, each one capable of reducing the entire hillside to rubble. "Well," Alexei whispered, a hint of his earlier humor returning, "I'd say we found them." Zarek analyzed the situation, his assassin's instincts kicking in. Their defenses are focused outward. They're not expecting an attack from behind. Lixia nodded. "If we can disrupt their communications, we might be able to buy enough time to escape." Alexei was already knocking an arrow, his eyes narrowed in concentration. "I've got something a little more direct in mind. Zarek, see that fuel cell they're using to power the seismic charges?" The assassin followed Alexei's gaze, spotting the glowing canister. "Yes, but surely your arrows can't penetrate." Before he could finish, Alexei loosed the arrow. It streaked through the air, its tip glowing with an eerie blue light. The arrow struck the fuel cell dead center, and for a moment, nothing happened. Then, with a sound like thunder, the cell exploded. The blast sent Confederation soldiers flying, their orderly formation dissolving into chaos. "Now," Alexei shouted, already moving, while they're disorganized. Zarek found himself swept up in the humans' confidence. Together, they burst from the cave, Alexei's arrows finding targets with unerring accuracy, while Zarek's claws made short work of any soldier who got too close. Alexei darted between them, making for the transport. If I can access their systems, I can send out a distress call to our allies. Alexei nodded, covering her advance with a barrage of arrows. Zarek marveled at the human's skill. Each shot seemed to find a weak point in the Confederation armor, disabling rather than killing. As they fought their way across the clearing, Zarek felt something he hadn't experienced in years, the thrill of being truly challenged. This human, this archer he had dismissed as primitive, was proving to be one of the most formidable allies he'd ever had. A Confederation officer, distinguished by his ornate helmet, raised a plasma rifle and took aim at Alexei's exposed back. Without thinking, Zarek threw himself into the line of fire. The blast caught him in the shoulder, sending him sprawling. Alexei spun, losing an arrow that took the officer in the throat. He rushed to Zarek's side, concern etched on his face. "Why?" he demanded as he helped the assassin to his feet. Zarek managed a pained grin. "Life debt, remember. Besides, I'm starting to think your primitive planet might be worth saving after all." A high-pitched whine filled the air, and they looked up to see a massive ship descending through the clouds. Its design was unlike anything Zarek had ever seen. Sleek, almost organic, with pulsing lines of energy running along its hull. "Reinforcements?" he asked, tensing for another fight. But Alexei was smiling. "No," he said, relief evident in his voice. "That would be the cavalry." As the strange ship opened fire on the remaining Confederation forces, Zarek realized that his hunt had led him to something far greater than a simple assassination. He had stumbled upon a turning point in galactic history, guided by a human with a bow and an unshakable determination. The hunt, it seemed, was only the beginning. The revelation. The sleek alien ship hovered above the clearing, its weapons systems making short work of the remaining Confederation forces. Zarek watched in awe as soldiers he had once considered invincible scattered before the onslaught. Beside him, Alexei stood tall, bow still at the ready, his eyes never leaving the newcomers. As the dust settled, a hatch opened in the ship's underbelly. A ramp extended, touching down gently on the forest floor. Zarek tensed, ready for anything, but Alexei placed a reassuring hand on his shoulder. "Easy," the human said. "These are friends." The figures that emerged from the ship defied easy categorization. They were roughly humanoid, but their bodies seemed to shift and flow, as if not fully committed to a single form. Their skin shimmered with patterns that reminded Zarek of star charts, and their eyes held the depth of galaxies. "Progenitors," Lixia breathed, her voice a mix of reverence and fear. One of the beings glided forward, its movement so smooth it appeared to be floating. When it spoke, the words seemed to bypass Zarek's ears entirely, resonating directly in his mind. "We have watched and waited for so long," the being said, its voice carrying the weight of eons. "But now, at last, the time has come." Alexei stepped forward, his posture respectful but not subservient. "I'm guessing you're not just talking about this little skirmish." The progenitor's form rippled in what might have been amusement. "Indeed not, young one. We speak of the culmination of millions of years of guided evolution. The emergence of a species that might, at last, join us as equals." Zarek found his voice, pushing past his awe and confusion. "But why? Why all the secrecy, the manipulation? Why create the Confederation at all?" The being turned its unfathomable gaze on Zarek. "To shepherd, to guide, to protect. The universe is vast and often hostile. We sought to create a framework within which younger races could develop safely, shielded from threats they were not yet ready to face." "Some safety," Alexei muttered, gesturing at the destruction around them. "Seems like your Confederation was pretty keen on wiping us out. An unfortunate but not unexpected development." Another progenitor said, joining the conversation. Power, even illusory power, can corrupt. Some within the Confederation lost sight of their true purpose. Lixia stepped forward, her earlier fear replaced by determination. That's what I discovered. The truth about the Confederation, about Earth's potential. They were willing to destroy an entire planet to keep it secret. The first progenitor nodded, the motion sending ripples of starlight across its form. Which is why we have decided to accelerate our plans. Humanity has progressed far more quickly than we anticipated, developing in ways we never imagined. Zarek frowned, pieces of the puzzle starting to fall into place. The friends who have been helping Earth prepare. They were your agents. Some, the progenitor acknowledged. Others were simply those who saw the potential in humanity and chose to nurture it, even against our directives. Alexei laughed, the sound tinged with disbelief. So what? Humanity is some kind of galactic chosen one. Forgive me if I'm a little skeptical. The progenitors exchanged a look that seemed to convey volumes. Not chosen, one said. Evolved. You have developed traits and abilities that we had thought impossible. Your adaptability, your creativity, your capacity for both great destruction and profound compassion. These are qualities that set you apart. But more than that, another progenitor added, you have achieved something truly remarkable. You have begun to tap into the fundamental forces of the universe in ways we never imagined. Zarek's mind raced, thinking back to Alexei's arrows, to the strange energy that had disrupted his systems. The weapons, he said slowly, they're not just advanced technology, are they? Alexei grinned, some of his usual cockiness returning. Let's just say we've learned a few new tricks. Turns out, when you combine cutting-edge physics with a healthy dose of human ingenuity, you get some pretty interesting results. The lead progenitor's form pulsed with what might have been approval. Indeed, you have taken your first steps towards manipulating the very fabric of reality. It is a power that, properly harnessed, could reshape the galaxy. Lixia gasped, her eyes wide. That's why the Confederation hardliners wanted Earth destroyed. They're afraid of what humanity might become. As well they should be, Zarek found himself saying. He thought back to how easily Alexei had bested him, how a simple bow and arrow had overcome technology he had thought invincible. If this is what humans can do now, imagine what they'll be capable of in a century, a millennium. The progenitors seemed to confer silently for a moment before the leader spoke again, which is why we have come. The time for hiding, for subtle manipulation, is over. We offer humanity a choice, to join us, to help us guide the younger races of the galaxy towards a brighter future. Alexei's expression hardened. And if we refuse, if we decide we'd rather forge our own path? The progenitor's form rippled, and for a moment, Zarek thought he saw a flicker of something almost human in its eyes. Then we will respect your decision. But know this, there are forces in this galaxy, ancient and terrible, that would see all life extinguished. We have held them at bay for eons, but our strength wanes. We need allies, equals, to stand with us against the coming darkness. As if on cue, the sky above them seemed to darken. Zarek looked up to see massive ships, far larger than anything the Confederation possessed, dropping out of hyperspace. It would seem, the progenitor said, its voice tinged with urgency, that our enemies have decided to force the issue. The harvesters have arrived. Alexei knocked an arrow, his earlier skepticism replaced by grim determination. I'm guessing these aren't the friendly type of ancient aliens. The progenitor's form solidified, taking on a more distinctly humanoid shape. They are the antithesis of all we have worked for. Where we seek to nurture life, they consume it. Where we guide, they destroy. Zarek felt a chill run down his spine. He had heard whispers, rumors of a force so terrible that even the Confederation feared to speak its name. The devourers of worlds, he muttered. Indeed, the progenitor confirmed. They seek to harvest the energy of all living things to fuel their endless expansion across the cosmos. And now, they have sensed the awakening power of humanity. Lixia's voice shook as she spoke. This is it, isn't it? The moment everything has been leading up to. The reason you've been guiding our development for millions of years. The progenitor nodded solemnly. A confluence of events, long foretold. The emergence of a race with the potential to turn the tide. The return of an ancient enemy. And a choice that will shape the fate of all life in the galaxy. Alexei looked at the massive ships descending through the atmosphere, then back at his bow. He laughed, but there was no humor in it. No pressure or anything. So, what's the plan? I'm guessing these harvesters aren't going to be impressed by a few trick arrows. The progenitor's form shimmered, and suddenly it was holding a device that looked like a more advanced version of Alexei's bow. We will share with you the full extent of our knowledge, our technology. But it is your unique understanding of these forces, your human intuition, that may make the difference. Zarek stepped forward, his earlier doubts forgotten in the face of this new threat. I may no longer serve the Confederation, but I am still a warrior. My skills are yours to command. Lixia joined them, her face set with determination. And my knowledge of Confederation systems might give us an edge. If we can turn their fleet against the harvesters. The progenitor nodded, its form rippling with what might have been hope. Then we stand together. Human, assassin, defector, and progenitor. The last line of defense against the end of all things. As the first harvester ships entered the lower atmosphere, their massive forms blotting out the sun, Alexei took a deep breath. He looked at Zarek, a wry smile on his face. Still think we're primitive? He asked. Zarek found himself returning the smile, feeling a camaraderie he had never expected to share with a human. I think, he said, extending his claws, that the galaxy is about to learn just how dangerous underestimating humanity can be. The progenitor raised its hand, and the air around them crackled with energy. Then let us show these harvesters the true power of life united. For Earth, for the galaxy, for the future of all sentient beings. As one, they turned to face the oncoming storm, ready to write the next chapter in the history of the cosmos. The revelation of humanity's true potential was about to be tested in the crucible of cosmic war, and Zarek found himself oddly grateful to be fighting alongside these remarkable humans. The hunt had led him to this moment, this impossible alliance. Now, it was time to see if the combined might of humanity's ingenuity and the progenitor's ancient wisdom could stand against the all-consuming hunger of the harvesters. The fate of the galaxy hung in the balance, and at its center stood a human with a bow, ready to loose an arrow that would echo across the stars. The Alliance. The sky darkened as the harvester ships descended, their massive forms casting eerie shadows over the forest. Alexei, Zarek, Lixia, and the progenitors stood together, an unlikely alliance formed in the crucible of impending doom. Alexei tested the weight of the advanced bow the progenitors had given him, marveling at how it seemed to anticipate his movements. So, he said, his voice tight with tension, any tips on fighting cosmic horrors? The lead progenitor's form shimmered, its voice resonating in their minds. The harvesters are not invincible, but they are formidable. They consume energy in all its forms, biological, technological, even the fundamental forces of the universe. Zarek flexed his claws, which now glowed with an otherworldly energy. How do we stop something that can devour everything? By using that very hunger against them. Lixia interjected, her eyes alight with sudden understanding. If they feed on energy, we overload them. The progenitor nodded, a ripple of approval passing through its form. Precisely. Your weapons, infused with our knowledge and powered by human potential, can deliver more energy than they can safely absorb. Alexei nocked an arrow, its tip pulsing with a strange, multi-hued light. So we're basically giving them cosmic indigestion. I can work with that. As if in response to their preparations, the first wave of harvester forces burst from the clouds. They were unlike anything Zarek had ever seen. Part machine, part organic matter, all of it twisted into nightmarish forms designed for a single purpose: consumption. Remember, the progenitor cautioned, they will adapt quickly. We must be unpredictable, creative. That is humanity's greatest strength. Alexei didn't wait for further instruction. He loosed his arrow, the projectile streaking through the air with a trail of prismatic energy. It struck the lead harvester construct, and for a moment, nothing happened. Then, with a sound like reality itself tearing, the construct imploded, taking several of its brethren with it. Not bad for a primitive, Zarek quipped, genuine admiration in his voice. But there was no time for celebration. The harvesters, momentarily stunned by the loss of their vanguard, surged forward with renewed fury. The air filled with the screech of otherworldly weaponry as energy beams lanced down from the ships above. Lixio worked feverishly at a console the progenitors had provided, her fingers flying over alien controls. "I'm trying to hijack the Confederation's defense grid," she shouted over the din of battle. "If I can bring it online, we might stand a chance." Zarek found himself fighting back-to-back with Alexei, his energized claws slicing through harvester constructs while the human's arrows found weak points with unerring accuracy. It was a dance of death, two former enemies now moving in perfect synchronization. "You know," Alexei grunted as he loosed another arrow, "for an assassin, you're not half bad in a stand-up fight." Zarek allowed himself a grim chuckle as he eviscerated a harvester drone. "And for a backwater primitive, you're surprisingly hard to kill." The progenitors moved among them, their forms shifting and changing as they engaged the enemy. Where they touched, harvester machines crumbled to dust. But even their ancient power seemed strained against the relentless onslaught. "We cannot hold them indefinitely," one progenitor warned, its voice strained. "The harvesters are drawing power from your sun, growing stronger with each passing moment." Alexei's face was a mask of concentration as he fired arrow after arrow, each shot finding its mark. "Then we need a game changer. Lixia, how's that defense grid coming?" "Almost there," she called back, her voice tight with tension. "But even if I get it online, I don't know if conventional weapons will be enough." Zarek's mind raced as he fought, pieces of information falling into place. "The bow," he said suddenly. "Alexei, the bow the progenitors gave you. It's not just a weapon, is it?" The lead progenitor's form pulsed with what might have been approval. "You begin to understand, assassin. The bow is a key, a focal point for the latent energy within humanity." Alexei's eyes widened as comprehension dawned. "You're saying I can channel more than just arrows through this thing?" "Your people stand on the precipice of a great awakening," the progenitor explained, even as it deflected a harvester energy blast. "The bow is a conduit, a way to focus the potential that lies dormant within you." A massive harvester construct, easily the size of a small building, tore through the tree line, its maw opening to reveal a swirling vortex of hungering energy. "Well," Alexei said, a hint of his old humor returning, no time like the present for a crash course in cosmic power. He took a deep breath, centering himself as Zarek and the progenitors moved to defend him. Alexei drew back the bowstring, but this time, no arrow materialized. Instead, the air around him began to shimmer and distort. Lixia's voice cut through the chaos. "Defense grid online," redirecting all power to Alexei's position. The bow in Alexei's hands began to glow, pulsing with an energy that made Zarek's enhanced senses real. The human's eyes snapped open, now burning with an inner fire that matched the intensity of the weapon he wielded. "Let's see how you like this," Alexei growled. He released the bowstring, and the world exploded into light. A beam of pure energy, more focused and powerful than anything Zarek had ever witnessed, lanced out from the bow. It struck the massive harvester construct head-on, and for a moment the behemoth seemed to swell, gorging itself on the influx of power. But it was too much. With a sound that defied description, the construct burst apart. The energy that had fueled it now turned against its brethren. A chain reaction spread through the harvester ranks, each explosion feeding the next. In the sky above, the massive harvester ships began to list and fall, their systems overloaded by the backlash of energy. As quickly as it had begun, it was over. Alexei slumped to his knees, the bow slipping from his grasp. Zarek was at his side in an instant, supporting the human. "Did we win?" Alexei mumbled, his voice weak, but his spirit unbroken. Zarek looked around at the devastation, at the retreating forms of the few surviving harvesters. "I think," he said slowly, "we may have just witnessed the beginning of a new era." The progenitors gathered around them, their forms pulsing with an emotion Zarek couldn't quite identify. Was it pride? Hope? "You have done more than win a battle," the lead progenitor said, its voice filled with awe. "You have proven that our faith in humanity was not misplaced. The alliance of progenitor wisdom and human potential is more powerful than we dared to hope." Lixia joined them, her eyes wide with wonder. The energy readings from that blast. It wasn't just the bow or the defense grid. "Alexei, you tapped into something fundamental, something woven into the very fabric of your being." Alexei managed a weak grin. "Does this mean I get to keep the fancy bow?" The progenitor's form rippled with what was unmistakably laughter. "It means, young one, that the bow is merely the beginning. Humanity stands on the threshold of a transformation that will reshape the galaxy." Zarek helped Alexei to his feet, feeling the sense of purpose he had never known in all his years as an assassin. "And we'll be there to help guide them," he said, surprising himself with the conviction in his voice. The human archer looked at him, a mix of exhaustion and excitement in his eyes. "We?" Zarek nodded. "I owe you a life debt, remember. Besides, someone needs to keep you primitive humans from accidentally destroying the universe with your newfound powers." As the sun began to break through the dissipating harvester ships, casting a golden light over the battered landscape, the unlikely allies stood together. Human, assassin, defector, and progenitor. A union that represented the best hope for the galaxy's future. The alliance had been forged in battle, tempered by revelation, and now stood ready to face whatever challenges the cosmos might throw at them. And at its heart stood a human with a bow, a symbol of the extraordinary potential that had lain dormant within humanity for so long. The harvesters had been driven back, but all of them knew this was only the beginning. The galaxy was changing, and they would be at the forefront of that change, guiding it towards a future brighter than any of them had dared to imagine. As they prepared to face the challenges ahead, Alexei hefted his bow with renewed determination. "So," he said, a glint of adventure in his eyes, "who's up for saving the universe?" The alliance, unlikely as it was, stood ready to do just that. The showdown. The days following the initial harvester attack were a blur of activity. Earth's governments, finally forced to acknowledge the reality of extraterrestrial life, scrambled to respond to the crisis. Alexei, Zarek, Lixia, and their progenitor allies found themselves at the center of a global effort to prepare for the inevitable return of the harvesters. "They'll be back," Alexei said grimly, addressing a room full of world leaders and military commanders. "And next time, they'll be ready for us." Zarek nodded in agreement. "The harvesters are relentless. They've consumed countless worlds across the galaxy. They won't give up on Earth easily." The lead progenitor, who had taken the name Aeon for ease of communication, stepped forward. Its form had stabilized into a more humanoid appearance, though it still shimmered with starlight. "We've detected massive energy signatures approaching the solar system," Aeon announced. "The harvesters are gathering their full strength. This will be their final assault." A murmur of fear ran through the assembled leaders, but Lixia's voice cut through the tension. "We have an advantage they don't expect. The Confederation's fleets are en route, answering the distress call I sent during the first attack. Can we trust them?" one of the generals asked, eyeing Zarek suspiciously. The former assassin met the general's gaze steadily. Many in the Confederation were kept in the dark about Earth's true nature. When they learn of the Harvester's threat, they will stand with us. The alternative is annihilation for all. Alexei clapped his hands, drawing everyone's attention. Right, so we've got allies coming, but we can't rely on them alone. We need to be ready to face the Harvesters head-on. Over the next few weeks, Earth underwent a transformation. Guided by progenitor knowledge and fueled by human determination, new weapons and defenses sprang up across the globe. Alexei worked tirelessly with other gifted individuals, teaching them to tap into the same cosmic energy he had unleashed against the Harvesters. Zarek found himself in charge of a multinational special forces unit, sharing his combat expertise and knowledge of alien tactics. He was surprised at how quickly the humans adapted, their creativity often leading to strategies he would never have considered. Lixia coordinated with Earth scientists, integrating Confederation and progenitor technology with human ingenuity. The results were nothing short of miraculous. Shields that could withstand Harvester energy weapons, propulsion systems that could outmaneuver their ships. As the day of the final battle approached, Alexei sought out Zarek. He found the alien warrior atop a hill overlooking the vast defense array they had constructed. Having second thoughts about throwing in your lot with us primitives? Alexei asked, a hint of their old banter in his voice. Zarek turned, his expression thoughtful. On the contrary, I find myself more certain of my choice with each passing day. Your people have accomplished in weeks what most races take centuries to achieve. Alexei nodded, his face growing serious. We've come a long way since you tried to assassinate Lixia in that forest. Indeed, Zarek agreed, though I maintain that if you hadn't cheated with those absurd arrows of yours, things might have gone differently. They shared a laugh, the sound tinged with the knowledge of what was to come. The sky above them was already beginning to darken, the first signs of the approaching Harvester armada visible to the naked eye. Do you think we can win? Alexei asked, his voice low. Zarek was silent for a long moment. I think, he said finally, that if any species in the galaxy has a chance against the Harvesters, it's humanity. Your adaptability, your sheer stubbornness in the face of impossible odds, it's unlike anything I've ever seen. As if on cue, alarms began to blare across the complex. Aeon's voice echoed in their minds, urgent and clear. They're here. The final battle begins. Alexei and Zarek shared one last look before sprinting towards the command center. Around them, humans and aliens alike rushed to their stations, a unified force prepared to face the greatest threat the galaxy had ever known. The sky above rioted with harvester ships, their dark forms blotting out the stars. But this time, Earth was ready. Defense platforms roared to life, sending lances of energy screaming into the atmosphere. Fighters, piloted by humans but enhanced with alien tech, rose to meet the invaders. In orbit, the Confederation fleet emerged from hyperspace, immediately engaging the Harvester armada. The space around Earth became a maelstrom of energy weapons and explosions. Alexei stood at the heart of it all, the advanced bow humming with power in his hands. Around him, other gifted humans prepared to channel their newfound abilities. Zarek flanked him, his claws glowing with deadly energy. Lixia manned a bank of computers, coordinating the global defense network. Remember, Aeon's voice resonated in their minds. The Harvesters will adapt to our tactics. We must be unpredictable, creative. That is humanity's greatest strength. The first wave of Harvester ground forces hit like a tsunami. Massive constructs, each one a nightmare fusion of machine and organic matter, tore through the outer defenses. But this time, Earth's defenders were ready. Alexei loosed arrow after arrow. Each shot a streak of pure cosmic energy that devastated the Harvester ranks. Zarek moved like a whirlwind, his enhanced abilities allowing him to take on multiple enemies at once. All around them, Humans wielded weapons and powers that would have been unimaginable just weeks ago. But the harvesters were relentless. For every construct destroyed, two more seemed to take its place. The defenders found themselves being pushed back, inch by bloody inch. "We need to target their command ship," Lixia shouted over the din of battle. "If we can take it out, it might disrupt their entire force." Alexei nodded grimly. "I've got an idea, but it's crazy." "Zarek, feel up for a little spacewalk." The alien assassin grinned, a fierce light in his eyes. "Lead the way, human." What followed was a desperate gambit. Using a combination of Confederation teleportation technology and Alexei's ability to manipulate cosmic energy, they managed to beam aboard the massive Harvester command ship. The interior was a nightmarish landscape of pulsing organic matter and cold machine precision. "Well," Alexei quipped as they materialized, "I've been in worse dives." They fought their way through corridors that seemed to shift and change, facing off against harvester drones that grew more deadly with each encounter. Zarek's assassin training proved invaluable, his knowledge of ship layouts guiding them towards what they hoped was the central control node. Finally, they'd reached a massive chamber dominated by a swirling vortex of dark energy. At its center floated a being that could only be the Harvester Queen, a monstrous fusion of flesh and machine. "You have come far, little morsels," the Queen's voice reverberated through their minds, dripping with malice. "But you are too late. Your world's energy will feed us for eons." Alexei knocked an arrow, the bow thrumming with barely contained power. "Sorry, Your Highness, but Earth isn't on the menu." What followed was a battle that would be spoken of for generations to come. Alexei and Zarek moved in perfect synchronization, their attacks amplifying each other's strengths. The Queen lashed out with tendrils of dark energy, each strike powerful enough to vaporize a lesser being. But the human and the alien assassin were not lesser beings. They dodged and weaved, Alexei's arrows finding weak points in the Queen's defenses, while Zarek's claws tore through her protective shells. As the battle raged on, Alexei felt something building within him, a wellspring of power unlike anything he had experienced before. He locked eyes with Zarek, a moment of unspoken understanding passing between them. "Do it," Zarek growled, engaging the Queen in close combat to give Alexei the opening he needed. Alexei drew back his bow, channeling not just his own energy, but the collective will of humanity, the ancient knowledge of the progenitors, and even the fierce determination of allies like Zarek. The arrow that formed was a thing of impossible beauty, a concentrated point of all that stood against the harvester's hunger. With a roar that shook the very foundations of the ship, Alexei loosed the arrow. It struck the Queen with the force of a supernova, the resulting explosion of energy cascading through the entire harvester fleet. In orbit and on the ground, the harvester forces suddenly faltered. Their constructs fell lifeless, their ships drifted powerless. The tide of battle turned in an instant. As alarms blared around them, Alexei and Zarek made their escape, beaming back to Earth just as the Harvester command ship began to implode. They materialized in the command center to cheers and cries of victory. Lixia rushed to embrace them both, tears streaming down her face. "You did it. The Harvester fleet is in full retreat. Earth is safe." Aeon approached, its form radiant with an emotion that could only be described as pride. "You have done more than save Earth," the progenitor said. "You have ushered in a new age for the galaxy." In the days that followed, the full impact of their victory became clear. The Confederation, impressed by Earth's role in defeating the Harvesters, extended an offer of full membership. But humanity, standing tall on the galactic stage, chose a different path. "We're grateful for the offer," Alexei said, addressing the Confederation Council with Zarek and Lixia by his side. "But Earth has its own destiny to forge. We propose a new alliance, not as subordinates, but as equals. Together with the progenitors and any who wish to join us, we can build a better future for all sentient beings." As negotiations began for this new galactic order, Alexei found a quiet moment with Zarek and Lixia. "So," he said with a grin, "not bad for a bunch of primitives." Zarek laughed, a sound he was still getting used to. "I suppose I may have to revise my definition of primitive." Lixia smiled, her eyes shining with excitement for the future. "The galaxy will never be the same, and it's all because a human with a bow refused to back down." As they looked out at the stars, now full of promise rather than threat, Alexei felt a sense of boundless possibility. Humanity had taken its first steps into a larger universe, armed with newfound powers, ancient wisdom, and allies from across the cosmos. The human archer, the alien assassin, and the galactic whistleblower, an unlikely trio that had reshaped the very fabric of the galaxy. And their adventure, they all knew, was only just beginning. As night fell on a changed Earth, Alexei raised his bow to the heavens, a salute to the infinite possibilities that awaited them all. "Well," he said, a glint of adventure in his eyes, "who's up for saving the universe again?" Zarek and Lixia's answering grins were all the response he needed. The stars beckoned, and this time, humanity was ready to answer the call.